What's going on YouTube? It's Teach, back again with another video. And today we are giving out my top 5 way too early 2024 running back rankings. Then we'll follow it up with 5 honorable mentions, throwing out 10 names in total for you to keep your eye on throughout the beginning of the college football season, and potential draft names to keep in the back of your mind before we get deep into the 2024 NFL draft cycle. Hopefully you guys enjoy. If you missed last week's quarterback rankings, definitely go back, check that out. I will warn you, I was a little bit more, there's so much to talk about with quarterbacks, so I got off into a handful of tangents, maybe a little all over the place. Today I promise I'll be a little bit more concise and straight to the point here, and we'll be a little bit more succinct here with the running backs. But quarterbacks, again, you could talk about so many different things, but definitely go back, check that video out if you missed it. Hopefully you guys enjoyed today's running back conversation. Hit the like button if you do. Subscribe if you're new to the channel and are excited for the 2024 NFL draft. And hey, really, there's no too early point to get started for NFL draft season. So here are my way too early running back rankings. We're just doing 5 down to 1, then 5 more honorable mentions. You can watch running back film on and on and on, but my problem is, and this is kind of my NFL view. There are special running backs, right? Not everybody's Nick Chubb. Not everybody is, prime Dalvin Cook. Not everybody's prime Derrick Henry, all that sort of stuff. But, middle of the road running backs are kind of dime a dozen. So I could watch a lot of these college running backs, and I'd be stuck with a long list of guys I think should be in that 6 to 10 range. So I kind of stopped it at 5 because I think these guys really could be special and be names that break on the scene. And then the next 5 I think are guys that could work themselves in that mix, but also we're probably in that 6 to 10 range, at least as I stand right now. But the more running backs I watch throughout the course of the year, there's gonna be a lot of names to talk about. And I do think it's gonna be a good running back class all in all. But let's start with number 5. I'm gonna go Donovan Edwards. We got 2 Michigan running backs to talk about today. Corum, was a guy that I loved, and we'll talk about him later on. I was really high on him in the 2023 draft, but Donovan Edwards, when Corum missed time, 7.1 yards per carry, leading all Power 5 running backs. I mean, he was a really special player for the Wolverines while, Corum was down with an injury. But he's got a little bit more of that big playability versus what you get out of Corum, who's much more picking it up in chunks. I'm trying not to talk about both of them at the same time. But 6'1", 205 pounds, also a different body build there. And then you also look at his home run ability. Corum is the guy who's going to pick it up in 8 to 15, 8 to 20 yard chunks. And again, I don't want to talk too much about Corum while I'm talking about Edwards, but Edwards had 5 runs last year alone of 50 plus yards. He brings that big playability, has a lot of acceleration, good agility to go with it. Also a comfortable receiver, only had 1 drop last season, which I really like, and comes with solid vision. My negative right now for Edwards, now granted he's a young player, but because he has those, big plays, and sometimes he gets a little impatient. He's looking to get that home run threat, and he's looking to bounce it outside and make that big chunk play. Where it feels like, that's why I say he's got solid vision, not great vision. There's other guys who I think have better vision in this class. But I think more often than not, Edwards chooses right, but when he doesn't, it's because he's hunting a big play when he doesn't need to. And he's not really a great blocker. So he could be a third down back in a receiving standpoint, but not going to do much in the way of being a pass protector in that stance. So not really what you're drafting a running back in the first round to do, or even in the second round to do, but it is something that you have to take into account. Also a younger player, so smaller sample size, but we did get a taste of what Donovan Edwards would be as a lead back while Corum was hurt last year, and it was really, really impressive. Then at number 4, we get TreVeyon Henderson. Tricky one for me to grade because he was the number 1 running back coming out of high school, and he did it in Virginia, not too far away actually from where I live, and was a huge talking point in and around where I'm from. So I'm trying to detach my local bias there, but I will say TreVeyon Henderson, a lot of these running backs in my top 5 in honorable mention have that ideal running back size to me. 5'9", 205, 5'9", 210. Henderson's 5'10", 212. So he's kind of in that perfect sweet spot for me. Short, hard to find behind offensive linemen, can hit the hole and squeeze through tight spaces, but has enough weight, 212 pounds to bounce off a tackler. So he's got that ideal frame that I have in mind for running backs. But obviously, again, former number 1 overall running back recruit coming out of high school, really comfortable pass catcher. And you go back 2 years ago when he got to Ohio State, he looked like a guy that was going to be a potential top running back in this year's class. And I really do love the vision. He feels like a very natural running back where it feels like he's not even thinking about playing. He's just solely playing football. He's playing a game. And I love that natural ease to his game. Now, granted, the cons here that he missed 5 games last year with a foot injury, didn't quite look as good as he did 2 years ago, didn't feel as natural and as smooth, and doesn't have game-changing speed either, and a foot injury is only going to complicate that a little bit more, but this is a guy who's going to pick it up with chunks, and there's not really a great comp that comes to mind, but he's going to do it 5 to 10 yards at a time. He's patient, and the other thing to mention here is he plays at Ohio State. So, yeah, maybe it looks like he has great vision, but Ohio State's offensive line, more often than not, is one of the best units in football, in college football. It's like one of the stronger offensive linemen in Power 5. So how much of it is Henderson, how much of it is the offensive line? I think that's a bigger question when it comes to evaluating running backs in general. We say the same thing at the NFL level, where it's like this offensive line is good enough to make any running back solid. This running back may be good, but his offensive line's bad. Like that relationship is obviously imperative, but it's hard to separate as well for Henderson, where it's like, I think he can, especially going back 2 years ago, he plays with enough power, can bounce off of guys, good vision, hits the hole, and makes that decision quick. He feels natural, but maybe that's just an offensive line that's kind of paving the way and he knows where to go because they practice it well or, whatever. Maybe it is vision, but also he may have good vision. What happens in a situation where he's getting hit right at the line of scrimmage? We get to see more of what he can do after contact and all that sort of stuff. So it's a little tough, but I think this is going to be a good year to gauge. And also you have Mayan Williams, who is going to be kind of right there on his heels, kind of forcing him to play better to keep Williams off of taking over that starting running back job there at Ohio State. So a couple of good backs there. Hopefully they push each other to be even better. My number 3 running back is going to be Braylon Allen. 6'2", 235. So he's not necessarily super different because even Trey Benson's a pretty big guy. But for me, I like these 5'10", 5'9" backs. So for me to have 3 guys in the top 5 that are all 6'1" or taller is a little uncomfortable. But when you watch their tape, it's just like, yeah, these guys are special. And Braylon Allen is an absolute physical freak. Insanely strong. If 6'2", 235 didn't tell you this guy's gonna be a power bruising back, then I don't know what to tell you, because he absolutely is. And he fits that archetype to a high degree. Good lateral movement, though. He's not just this guy who wins with power. He can shift side to side, has a little bit of that one cut ability. Kind of like Zach Charbonnet last year, where it's like, if he plants his foot and makes a cut, it's a good cut, and he can kind of work with it. If you're asking him to be Shady McCoy and bounce around and juke spin, all that sort of stuff, not necessarily his strength, but he can play a little lateral, and I like the explosiveness working left to right, and he's got that one cut ability that I do like. Good footwork all in all, kind of touching on that jump cut, one cut ability. Good vision, quick decision making, and also he's a very young prospect. He won't be 20 until January of this year, and that means over the last 2 years at Nebraska, he's had 1,200 yards. 8 of the last 2 years at Wisconsin. Over the last 2 years at Wisconsin, he's had 1,200 yards each of those 2 seasons. That means he did it at 17 and 18 years old. That is insane. And then a couple other final notes. I think there is potential for him to get even better as a third down player, both as a pass catcher where he's kind of okay right now. And I think with his strength and his frame, he could be a lot better of a pass protector than he is currently right now. But I do think there's room for him to grow. And again, only 20 years old. I think there is a high work ethic. He's only played 2 years of college football, very young, not only from talking about a running back who's a redshirt senior. No, he's only played 3 years of college football, and I think that's all he's going to end up playing. I think he will declare this after this upcoming season at Wisconsin. So there's certainly time to kind of figure out that third down stuff there for Allen. The cons, he's not going to win with game-changing speed. That's kind of the one thing that comes to mind. He's 6'2", 235, good lateral movement, wins with power. He's not going to break off 80-yard runs. But if you're willing to settle for that, like if you have an explosive passing attack and you're willing to settle for a guy that's going to pick up 8, it feels like every time he touches the ball, okay. Good. Or if you're looking to add him to a committee where you already got somebody who wins with speed and this is your physical complement, he's the perfect guy for that. All right, let me get into the top 2 here. Trey Benson very nearly took my number 1 spot, and there's a ton of hype for Benson right now. 6'1", 215, 51% forced missed tackle rate using PFF's data there. That's a PFF record. College, as far back as they go, from the early 2000s. That's crazy. So, yeah, this guy's slippery as it can possibly get. Now, that being said, he's going to have a bigger workload. He wasn't this guy with 200 plus carries last year. He's going to see more carries, more workload this year. So we're going to see how much of that forced missed tackle rate was based off a maybe smaller quote unquote sample size, and how much that changes with a bigger role in that Florida State offense. 91.4 PFF rushing grade. I really like his contact balance. Feels comfortable absorbing hits and be able to bounce off of it. Has the ability to kind of turn the corner, hit the gas, and make DBs and linebackers alike look silly with their angles. He's got that extra gear you're looking for on top of the slippery nature. And being 215, his long speed, you got to be able to appreciate for a guy that big. And again, a guy who could bounce off of tackles that can move like that is special. And then I think you can rely on him on third downs. This is a little bit of a projection here. Again, smaller sample size, but I feel comfortable with him specifically as a receiver in third down situations. Feels comfortable mostly in the screen game. And I don't really know what's entirely there as a blocker, but again, 6'1", 215. I feel like he's got the ability to at least get one hit off, hold off a pass rusher, especially if it's like a team blitzes 6, you're only blocking 5, and he's that 6th guy. I feel like he can land that one hit by that quarterback, that half second to a second they need. But we'll see where it goes beyond that. But I think he's got the frame to be a solid blocker, and I think he's an okay receiver. And then some of the negatives, he runs really upright, which is uncomfortable, and it makes you think, why is this guy so fast? Because like if you're running upright, like naturally there's just more like wind resistance, but also running upright, you're more likely to fumble the football, right? Let somebody poke it away from behind, but also just a hit in general you don't see coming could jar it loose. So I do worry about what that means for fumble issues. But that being said, he didn't really have any turnover problems last year at Florida State. Maybe a bigger role will bring that issue to light, but what we know so far with him and the Seminoles, he's not really been turnover prone. So that upright stature, he's still super fast. He doesn't turn the ball over, so it's kind of a nitpick, and it's just something that looks a little weird to me. But all in all, you can't even really fault him for it. Then we get to my number 1 running back, Blake Corum. And for transparency, it's a little tough to do this because I know so much more about him versus all these other guys, where I'm kind of just dipping my toes in the water with Trey Benson and Braylon Allen, and I'm kind of getting a feel for it, looking back to the games I would watch last year when these guys were on TV and the big games I remember watching for Wisconsin, Florida State, all that stuff, yada, yada, yada. Blake Corum was a guy I got in the weeds with because he was going to be my number 3 running back in 2023 NFL draft. Preseason it was Gibbs and Bijan as my 2 and my 1 respectively. They were my preseason top 2 backs, and that throughout college football last year, I never saw anything that made me change my mind, with the exception of Blake Corum. Blake Corum was so good last year, and I was like, maybe do I put him over Gibbs? I still felt comfortable putting Gibbs at 2 and then Corum at 3, but it was almost like a 2A, 2E, 2B, where Gibbs brings that upside. He's an even better pass catcher and doesn't really have injury concerns. Corum, even with the injury, I was like, I still think he's kind of my 2B, technically RB3. Love the body build, 5'8", 210. Again, hard to see behind the line of scrimmage. Good bouncy lateral movement. Really nice contact balance. To me, he's got the best contact balance of any of the guys I've watched so far. Awesome vision. Sees the hole, hits it quick, doesn't waste a moment. And kind of off that, again, I even put in my notes, very quick in that first step to hit the hole. So not only his vision and decision making, but it's just his explosiveness, his acceleration. And again, ideal size. Love that frame. And a guy who's just going to reliably 8 to 15 yards. He's not averaging that, but that kind of leads us into the cons. He's not, his big plays aren't 50-yard runs like Donovan Edwards. His big plays are like 25, maybe 20 yards, something like that. But he's just so reliable and so consistent. And it feels like he gets more of those chunk plays than other guys. So even if his chunk plays are, let's just say 10 to 15 yards, if he's hitting it enough, I'm willing to sacrifice that. It's not going to be 50 yards because he keeps picking up 10 to 15 yards a chunk, and I'm going to keep getting first down. So I just love how steady and consistent. And I tend to have a bias towards running backs like this. I love home run ability for sure, like a Devon A-Chain. I love that guy, and I'm excited to watch him as much as anybody else. But at the same time, I just think about what I would want out of a roster. And if I have an explosive passing attack, I want consistent yardage gain on the run game. If I want to hand it off to give my quarterback a second to breathe and just take a second to not have to process and make through multiple reads and give his brain just a moment to chill, I want a guy like Blake Corum who I can be like, hey, if I hand it off to him, there's like a 50-50 shot he gets 8 yards just because he's that good. And it's just that bouncing. He's got contact balance, and he's got the vision, good explosiveness, good enough speed, not great, but he's just kind of got this complete package, and I think it all comes together to make him a really solid, dependable player. So that's where my love for Blake Corum stems from, but also I do have to admit I am so much further along in the scouting process, or at least was with the 2023 cycle, versus where I am with all these other guys. But anyways, let's go ahead and start talking about some honorable mentions here. Some fun guys to talk about. So you get Raheem Sanders, running back from Arkansas, 6'2", 227, and 16 runs last year of 20-plus yards. That's what you need to know. They call him Rocket, and he totally plays like it. This guy has a rocket up his ass, super fast, can get those chunk plays and get those explosive plays. Excited to see what a backfield of him and KJ Jefferson looks like. Can we just talk about KJ Jefferson at like 6'5", 245, and then next to him is Rocket Sanders at 6'2", 227. Like, sorry for any defensive line that thinks has to deal with that task, because those are some monsters to try to break down. But I like that big play upside. And anytime with those big play, have that 20-plus splash ability. I always worry about turnovers with those guys. Just feels like something that tends to, and this is a stereotype for sure, but tends to be more of an issue with those guys versus the slow and steady power backs that are picking 4 or 5 yards up with a pound of dust as well. So keep an eye on that, of course, as well. But I want to see what more he can do as a receiver, too, especially in an offense that might need it. I want to see if they lean on him as a receiver. Then we get to Bucky Irving, really fun player. Another guy with an insane forced missed tackle rate of 43% last year. But kind of like Benson, the sample size is a little skewed, right? I think Benson maybe had a little bit more of a role in Florida State's offense than Bucky Irving and Oregon's. But I think he'll have a bigger workload in front of him this year, and we'll get to see how true that forced missed tackle rate is. But big time, playmaker, has the long speed and that forced missed tackle rate. If you're talking about that speed that can create chunk plays and that elusiveness, all right, I'm listening. 5'10", 195, kind of around that ideal size for me as well. Then the next guy I want to talk about here is Devin Neal from Kansas. He's actually the man on the screen, and he's a player I didn't expect that I would actually really enjoy wanting to watch, but really good receiver, and I think that's what stood out the most. Like, of the guys that I know and have watched so far, I feel like he's the best receiver I've watched to this point, and the most comfortable specifically in the screen game. Like, he almost just wants to be that Christian McCaffrey extra receiver on the field type of guy. Very quick runner, very explosive one cut, not only with a long speed, but you see it laterally. This guy is just an absolute jitterbug. Bouncy is all get out. A ton of elusive ability, and I really do like the vision. So when you talk about receiving ability, long speed, bouncy elusiveness, and I like the vision, this is just becoming a guy that I think could become a sneaky, maybe even works his way into that early second round, late first round conversation. But we'll see what happens with Kansas this year. 5'11", 190 pounds. Maybe the frame, maybe he's a little slim for some. But I can see him having a big year at Kansas. And they had a turnaround season last year, so they're kind of on the up and up. And this could be the year where Devin Neal takes it to the next level and kind of breaks onto the scene. The one negative I have for him, well, there's really two. One, he's not much in the way of a blocker, which 5'11", 190 would maybe suggest, but also sometimes he's hunting for the big play too much. Now, granted, I said Kansas had a breakout year last year, but there's still Kansas football where it's still not great. Maybe that's what's leading to him hunting for those big plays, trying to win a game for the Jayhawks. But I'd love to see him be a little bit more comfortable, a little bit more patient, not hunting for a big play every time he gets the football in his hands, and feeling comfortable picking up with whatever presented to him on that given play. But I do like Devin Neal a lot, and he was a player that kind of surprised me with how much I did enjoy watching him. Then we get into a couple guys who are former transfers. So we start with Carson Steele at UCLA at 6'1", 215. Kind of even has that Zach Charbonnet build. Transfer from Ball State. Guy who made Bruce Feldman's freak list last year, was player number 98. So, and at that point was 6 foot 225, listed at Ball State. UCLA has him at 6'1", 215. So obviously we'll know once we get to the combine. So a little bit of measurement inconsistencies there, but big, powerful, strong guy nonetheless. And you got to get that with benches 405, squats 615, and has 7% body fat. This guy is a legitimate muscle monster. Good lateral movement for that size. Kind of, again, gave him that Zach Charbonnet vibes where, yeah, he's a power back, but he can move left to right at a good enough level. Has good ability to stop and start. I think he's got a little bit more than Charbonnet did in that ability to be able to go from 0 to 100, 100 back down to 0. And enough straight line speed for college. It's going to be interesting to see what that 40 is if he does declare. And if it's at Charbonnet ran 4.53, and I was like, I think he's going to run high 4.5s or low 4.5s for that matter, like a good 4.5 time, which 4.53 I would put in that category as low 4.5s. I could see where Steele's probably in that 4.56, 4.58 range, but I still don't think that's too bad because of what else he brings to the table. I'm interested to see what he looks like in a Power 5 conference. Obviously, that's going to be one of my cons I have to note. Ball State versus UCLA, huge step up in competition, and he's not really a great blocker when I think he should be, so I'd like to see that improve this upcoming season. And the last guy I want to talk about is Blake Watson, transfer from ODU to now Memphis, so we'll start with the cons here. Of course, want to see how that jump in competition and how he handles it, how he fares. Also, a little bit of a slighter frame, 5'9". He's listed at 195, but this is definitely one of those guys I think is going to be ending up at a lower weight once we get to the combine or his pro day or whatever. Maybe that frame scares off some. But yeah, I think the size is ideal. We'll see what happens with the weight. If he ends up bulking up, maybe we're good. But I could also see where he ends up going down to 185 or something like that. And then maybe I'll take that ideal size note away. But 5'9" to me is kind of the perfect height for a running back. Really good agility, has the acceleration to go with it. Like the vision and good patience. It's not like Le'Veon Bell patient, but I don't think he's trying to force the issue. And it's more so patience within the offense. Like he's comfortable taking a 3-yard run, and maybe they see something that then sets up and know, okay, I can bounce this out next time, and I'll be able to get that 70-yarder I'm looking for. Like he's not always hunting for a big play, which I really like when a running back has that confidence in an offense and willingness to just wait a little bit longer, which, not all guys do. We've already talked about a few that I think could be better about that. Really, because of his 5'9", maybe he is a little bit lighter, really good at fitting into tight spaces. And because of that, I think he's got the speed to be a guy who can run outside the tackles, but also shifty and thin enough, so to speak, to where he can be an interesting guy to run between the tackles and really hard to find behind the line of scrimmage for linebackers and defensive linemen alike. So I think he could be a guy that wins both inside and outside of tackles in the run game, which is solid to say. And he's a pretty good receiver. And we know what Memphis does with their running backs and their receiving ability. So Blake Watson's either going to break onto the scene as one of the best receivers in this draft class at the running back position, maybe even transition wide receiver or something like that. I don't know. Memphis can be weird, but or not weird, but it's interesting how they get that out of all their backs, like an Antonio Gibson and guys like that who have come before. But I think as is right now, a solid wide receiver, and maybe even gets even better with this Memphis coaching staff and their tutelage and their leadership. But guys, that is going to do it for my way too early 2024 running back rankings. Give you 1 through 5 and as well as 5 honorable mentions. Let me hear some names that you guys like from this group down below in the comment section. Maybe names I listed, or if you think there's somebody that I left off and I'm wrong so for doing that, let me hear that name down below in the comments section, and let me hear why you think they should be somewhere in these top 10 running back conversations for the 2024 NFL Draft. But hopefully you guys enjoyed. Hit that like button if you did. Subscribe if you're new to the channel. And until next time, my name is Teach, and I am signing off.